This Choircast podcast is being brought to you by Rituals for Heretics. For millennia, people have been meeting deep psychological needs through religious ritual and meditation practices. Rituals for Heretics takes rituals and meditation practices from all kinds of religions and deletes the God part of it while leaving the psychological work that is being done so that you can put whatever you believe or don't believe about God back into the ritual or meditation practices. Get your copy today on Amazon or wherever you purchase books.
You've wandered into snarky faith, the place where American Christianity gets skewered, roasted, and served cold. Faith on the fringe, naming what's broken, keeping what matters. Strap in. This is Snarky Faith.
Previously on Snarky Faith.
Your sighting I'm wearing right now.
There it is.
I try to wear it every day.
Why do you wear it?
Because I love Jesus and I believe my faith is the reason I'm here, and this is God's plan for my life. And faith is what grounds me, and what allows me to be good at my job and be good at as a mom. And it's all glory to God, and I'm only here because of Him. And I believe that to my core, and that's very important to me in my personal life, my professional life, and that's why I'm very proud to wear this cross. It brings me comfort, especially going into the lion's den of the press briefing room.
God's plan is that Jesus is the reason for the season and the treason and my cross and my faith and my moral decay. And as long as I keep tossing this word salad around, I don't even have to think of the rot that's going on in my soul. Yeah. We're starting this one hot. We're starting this episode hot. Welcome to Snarky Faith. My name is Stuart Deloney. I'm your host. And today we're going to be devoting this entire episode to this book that is out. Quantum Theology, Volume 1, of which I wrote a chapter in this book. We're going to be talking to some of the other authors as well as Keith Giles, the dude. So we'll be getting to that in a second. But hey, that's a book. I've got another book. Anybody like satire? Anybody like satire that roasts and takes on end times culture, the stuff that we grew up with, the trauma factory that was our life? Yes, the Tribulation Survival Guide. It's available now where they sell books. And you didn't even ask for this, but I'm going to give it to you anyways. What? Is there more? There's more. Oh my goodness, the Tribulation Survival Guide coloring book? Yes, that's right. There's a coloring book. There is. So you can color your way through the end times. It's all backed with scripture. And it just gives our own snarky interpretations of how scripture is for the end times. But enough of this nonsense. Let's get to something more substantial, something more, let's say, quantum, as we hop in on the interview with a bunch of amazing authors, including myself. So let's hop to it. So today we're talking with contributors for Quantum Theology Volume 1, diving into big ideas like wholeness, fragmentation, consciousness, identity, and what faith looks like when certainty gives way to mystery. I'm joined by Keith Giles, Nish Dubashia. Close enough?
Close enough.
Close enough. Thank you, sir. You're very gracious. And Mo Thomas as well. Thomas, did I get that right as well?
You got it. You nailed it.
Okay, great. Wonderful. And so Keith is an author, speaker, and the driving force behind this Quantum Theology anthology. And he's spent years exploring the intersection of Christian mysticism and deconstruction and the strange places where faith and quantum ideas overlap. Nish opens the book with a chapter exploring with what he calls Diamond Christianity, a vision of faith built around wholeness and interconnected reality. His work draws on theology, philosophy, and the ideas of a physicist, David Bohm, to rethink how we see Christ in the world. And Mo brings a contemplative perspective to the conversation, exploring the difference between our ego and identity and deeper awareness. His chapter uses story and metaphor to ask a simple but unsettling question: who are we beneath the roles that we think we are? And so, first question up, Keith.
Yeah.
What led you to put this whole thing together? Did you have a moment where you're like, hey, let's pull all these folks from these desperate places and put them in a book?
Yeah. Well, of course, yes. That's exactly what happened. Kind of like shower thoughts. Well, so, for me as an author, I've been on this kind of quantum theology track personally. Started when I wrote this book, Sola Mysterium, about embracing mystery, and then Sola Deus. And then when I wrote the commentary on the Gospel of Thomas, which was the quantum sayings of Jesus, that really kind of kicked it off for me. And starting to see these ideas that are in quantum physics, quantum science, and how they mirror some of the same concepts that mystics have been saying for thousands of years. And so I'm very excited about that and working on my own little quantum theology series. But I thought, you know what, this topic is so fascinating to me. And the more I talk to people about it, I run into people all the time that are kind of on this same wavelength. And I thought it would be really great to like, hey, let's just publish one of these kind of anthology books where I invite different people. And what always happens when I do these, I've done several of these with Choir Publishing. We did one on Christian nationalism. We've done them on deconstruction and different faiths and things like that. So I thought, well, it'd be great to do one like that, specifically for quantum theology. I had in my mind a couple of people I wanted to invite. But once I started inviting the people that I was aware of, other people would suggest, oh, you got to invite this person, or you got to mention this person, you got to, talk to that guy, or this lady, and so yeah, I started reaching out, put the word out, and I started receiving the chapters, and as always happens with these kinds of anthologies, the quality of the submissions that I received far exceeded my expectations. I realized like this is going to be an amazing book, and actually that's when I decided this was going to be a series. Like, so that's where the volume 1 came in, because I literally got more than I could use for this first volume, and I thought, well, we're going to hold on to some of these and continue recruiting more for volume 2, hopefully next year. So yeah, I was very, very blown away with all the different perspectives that I received, and great chapters. So including Nish and Mo. And you, Stuart, actually.
And so with most anthologies, when you put the chapters together, Keith, you're ranking these in best to least, right? So like if you're chapter 1, you're obviously the best. Number 2, great silver medal. And then all the way down. Is that how you compile these?
Not exactly, no.
Okay.
But there is a flow. I do really consider, like, for example, when I read, oh gosh, I can't remember, was it Jay Clark? Jeremy Evans. When I read Jeremy Evans' submission, I thought this is how we have to end the book. I just thought his chapter was beautiful, and it ended on a really great emotional kind of note that I thought this would be really wonderful to kind of end it. And similar, like when I read Nish's, I thought this would be a great way to kind of kick it off. And then yeah, so that I am thinking through the flow of and so then I thought, okay, what would be great for something after what Nish wrote? Like I think what Mo said would kind of be the next thing that would make sense. So I did think about that, how these kind of connect together. We had a couple that were a couple of submissions like William Serrell and Jenny Lorraine Nielsen that were very technical, used a lot more scientific language. I mean, Nish does a little bit as well, but I felt like Nish did a good job of kind of, walking the line there between speaking to people that could just understand it, everyday people, but also putting enough science in there to back it up. Anyway, but when I got to more of the technical stuff like William and Jenny, I thought, okay, these need to go maybe after people have got 2 or 3 chapters under their belt. Maybe now they're ready for something like, whoa. So yeah, that kind of thing. There's a flow to it, and I did my best to create some kind of a flow for the reader.
I think you did a good job with it. I really liked how it all kind of transpires, and it kind of leads you along this path of different voices, which is kind of beautiful. And so speaking of the number 1, our gold medal winner, Nish, our first one out here. So Nish, like your chapter talks a lot through the lens of wholeness instead of fragmentation. And so for you, like, what do you think the church has misunderstood about reality when it treats everything as separate?
Yeah, great question. When I studied maths and physics. When I started studying physics, and especially quantum physics, it became quite clear to me that reality is an interconnected and undivided whole. That was clear from some of the experiments that physicists were doing. So it seemed also that wholeness is more fundamental than the world of separation in which we live. So it seemed to me that this has to be reflected. If our religions and religious traditions are going to be true to reality, this has to be reflected somehow in the theology of those religions. Now, some of the Eastern religions, but not all of them, but some of them already do this quite well. I think one of the problems I started to have when I studied Christian theology is that there seems to be some very hard divides and dualisms that are not ever overcome. So God and the world are absolutely separate in traditional Christianity. Different people, even though we call believers the body of Christ, that oneness isn't really as deep as it could be. They're still basically separate people. Good and evil are absolutely separate. So it seemed to me that there was a lot of scope as Christianity continues to evolve, as well as the other traditions, for a greater recognition of this wholeness and a greater questioning and overcoming of some of these hard divisions and dualisms that seem to be really hardwired already into this tradition.
So you talk about this like you began to see this pattern,
Yes.
you began to see it. So how did it begin to affect you personally? Because, it's one thing to be able to do this ideologically, or we're able to kind of understand it, but when it starts to get into you, how did it start to affect you?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So my initial motivation was, let's find out what all the religions and traditions, is there anything in common? Do they have anything in common? And I found there was this kind of pattern, which I later developed into what I call the diamond model, this sort of wholeness underlying it. There's a multiplicity of things and events that emerge out of this wholeness. And there's a fragmentation that takes place if the multiplicity loses touch with this underlying wholeness, which obviously it has done if you just look around the world. That's obvious. So for me, what became, in addition to studying it, what became important to me was, what can I do in my life to realize this for real, experientially? It's one thing to read about wholeness and particles and implicate orders and all this stuff, but how can I see that that is true experientially, not just because the maths implies it, but in my own life? So what I did is, in my early 20s, right up to the present day, I started to practice quite seriously different disciplines from across the spiritual traditions, meditation from the East, and then later on, when I was probably mid-20s, late 20s, some of the practices in the Christian traditions, such as certain types of prayer that you get in Eastern Orthodoxy, which I found to be the most mystical of the traditions. So it's through that practice and trying to live out that practice in my relationships with people with varying degrees of success. That was the way I felt I had to make this real, not just stuff I'm writing about or speaking about. Yeah.
So what did you start seeing? How did it change you? I mean, you're implying, and you walked into this and how it impacted your relationships. Did it start to change the way you looked at the world, how you interacted with others? I mean,
So yes, I think over time I started to become, and it did take time, many, many years of practice. I did start to become familiar with some of these states of consciousness that mystics talk about. So for example, when I was in my early to mid-20s, I had quite a deep nature mystical experience when I was going out for a walk in a village where I lived. And that experience was really the oneness of nature and the divinity in nature, and it actually transformed me so much. The next day I went and left my job and took a much more simple, less paid job, to the complete astonishment of everyone who knew me, because that just didn't appeal to me anymore, and I knew I had to spend more time on this thing that had revealed itself to me as much more real. And in relationships as well. Now, I have to say I'm just as much of a jerk as anybody else much of the time in relationships, but certainly there have been times when that sense of separate self, particularly I have to say in my relationship with my wife, which is a deep, loving relationship, and with some close friends, there are times of communion where that sense of separation dissolves, and you can feel it and see it, that there is an underlying wholeness behind everything.
So for you, making this big decision you had this experience, and then you decide, I'm going to leave this job, this better paying job where I've been doing, I've worked towards this, and I'm taking a different path here. Beyond the fact that other people may have been like, what are you doing? But did it give you a different sense of self? Did it give you a different sense of peace to be able to walk in this alternative way?
Oh, it absolutely did, because I was very much on a path of, a math student and from a good university and so on. I was very much on a path of success in the financial field and moving up the ladder and earning lots of money. And almost overnight, after this nature mystical experience, I saw the fallacy of that. It seemed that way to me. That's actually only going to increase the division and dualism that I'd already seen through intellectually.
Mm-hmm.
So I just couldn't. The motivation and the drive just kind of vanished. I had to just move to a more simple, peaceful job, like half the salary, and really just devote my life more to writing and practicing and so on. And yes, it gave me much more peace and happiness, and gave me the time and the space and the disposition to open myself up to the whole in a way I couldn't have done with the previous lifestyle. So it was a big transformation.
Now, just one last question in this
Sure.
lane that we're going in here. Were you married when you had this time period and you quit your job to do something lesser? Were you married?
I am grateful to say that I wasn't married at that point.
Okay.
I was happily single, living with my parents, and so I had the freedom to do all these crazy things.
Okay. Okay.
After I got married, it was several years before I told my wife about this awakening experience. So no, I was single and had more freedom at that point.
Okay. Because I know many times when people, whether it's deconstruction or that have these life-changing experiences, it's oftentimes hard if we're married, if we have a partner or a spouse in this situation to where it's like, yay, we're going this way. Nope, now we're going this way.
Yeah,
so it's a lot.
I was lucky that life circumstances allowed me to do that. If I was married with children and had a huge mortgage, that might have been a lot more difficult. So
that's fair.
Yeah, I was fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your point of view. Yeah,
that's good. Love it. I love it. Now for Mo, your chapter explores this idea that we may have mistaken our ego for our real identity, almost like, as you put it, like an actor stuck in a role. For you, how did you start to begin to see this distinction in your life?
I didn't have the jumping off the cliff experience that Nish did. I was the married with a mortgage, high-paying job, and I kept that when I had my experience. And I wasn't asking for it. I wasn't involved in meditation or contemplative prayer at the time. It happened after this, but I was lying in bed one night and was looking up at the ceiling and had this mystical experience where I was taken through a black hole. And the process of going through it, an object that passes the point of no return, the event horizon, encounters something called spaghettification. And for me, that meant stripping my spirit from the body and the mind, the soul and the body. And all that remained was consciousness or pure awareness. And I didn't know what to do with that. When I landed on the other side within this center point of the black hole, the singularity, it took me about 5 or 6 years. I had set it aside in order to come back to it and start processing. What does this mean for the way that I show up in life? You know, I was in the throes of a massive deconstruction of my childhood religion. There were essential qualities that I wanted to keep, that I knew were pointing to something real, but there was a lot that I knew I needed to shed. And so this black hole experience became an invitation for me to explore what does that look like for real, not the abstract ideas like Nish was talking about. So for me, that really became self-reflection of the ways that I had shown up were mostly to please whatever audience I was in front of, whether that was work or church. I showed up in order to be the person that they expected, that they wanted to see show up. Never the authentic me under all that. So the layers, as they started being shed, and they're still being shed, I just started to feel that sense of authenticity and real connection with people, entanglement with people show up, the patience with people and looking underneath their behavior. That all of a sudden became a reality. I was drawing from a near infinite supply of patience where that was not true before. So yeah, my experience was somewhere in the 2012 time frame, and it took till about 2018 for me to start processing what does that look like, and I've been doing that ever since. I did then leave a corporate job and started writing and speaking and doing things like what my heart told me I needed to do, even though it was out from under the umbrella of this safe corporate umbrella. And it did not just this, or other things involved. It did cost me quite a bit to go through this, including a marriage, including the job, including, lost a home. There were things that were happening that sped up the deconstruction process. So yeah, that black hole imagery is what I brought into my chapter, because the actor playing his role, I had him metaphorically go through a black hole to see what that stripping away process for him mirrors that stripping away process for us, getting to our true self.
No, I love that. I love, because usually that spaghettification process. It's never one that's like always joyful. It's that kind of pulling apart of ego and stuff. It kind of feels a bit like cheese grater on the skin, or like a bit of flaying of the soul. But it leaves us different on the other end. So Mo, but if someone is like feeling stuck in a role like you're talking about, caught like in identity and fear, what begins to wake someone up to something deeper when we're in that place?
I've heard a lot of the mystics talk about two things that bring this about. One is great suffering, and the other is great love. For me, it was great suffering. And for most that I know, something has to jar us out of the mode of just coasting through life. And often, I don't know why it works this way, but it's great suffering. And that just jars us enough to where we look and explore other options, look for and explore other options. And that's what it was for me. It was an incredible sense of suffering. So what I was doing wasn't working. I needed another model, another way to look at life. So the thing that I would share with people now who are kind of in that maybe dipping their toe in the water phase is that spaghettification is like a cheese grater. Stuart, you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of fear for people to do that self-reflection, for fear of what they'll find. My encouragement is to be just extraordinarily patient and kind to yourself, because under that layer is when you get to the good stuff. You will get there if you stay with it. Don't be intimidated at what you first find. For me, it was terrifying, and I was doing it on my own. I didn't have other people, Keith has a large network of people who are in this mode. I didn't know any of them at this point. I wish I would have read Nish's chapter back in the day, and realized the wholeness under the fragmentation existed. So I was terrified to jump in. Now looking back, I would say just be extraordinarily kind and patient with yourself as you're going through this, because it will be worth it.
No, that's huge. I think self-patience, yes, being patient with yourself going through this and being very loving and kind is key to it, because I think I've wrestled through it, and I've been quite the opposite to myself while wrestling through it as well. Frustrated, angry, and all of that. Keith, what led you to your quantum slippery slope into the event horizon of no turning back?
Yeah. Well, so it's slightly different. I mean, I can identify with what Nish and Mo are saying about going through that the suffering and all that, and I've gone through that. I think I went through that initially when I went through my initial deconstruction process. But what happened was I had started this course called Square One, and it's a course in a community of people, and it was helping other people kind of also process their deconstructing their faith and figuring out what made sense next, right? So in the process of that, helping other people go through their processes, some of the principles that we came up with were things like, like for example, I would say like in all your deconstructing of your faith, I would highly suggest you deconstruct your need to be right about everything. And then that led to sort of the embracing of mystery. And it's not about certainty, it's about curiosity, that the gospel is not about information, that it's about transformation. So I was already thinking along these ways, kind of coming out of my evangelical Christianity. And at the same time, of course, I was writing this 7-part Jesus on Book series, dealing with each of these kind of pillars of theology, nationalism, the church, the Bible, the cross, atonement, and all that stuff, hell, all that, right? So I finished writing these series of books, and I was done with that, right? And so I reached a point where I was like, okay, I've done this. I've sort of processed what I don't believe anymore, and I kind of think I know where I land. And where I landed really was this mystery. So that's when I wrote the book Sola Mysterium. And really, for me, that was the pivot point. That's when I really kind of decided, and I even think I say this in the book, right? That it was realizing that, like, I love Jesus. He's my guy. I love. He's my touch point. But realizing, like that. Yes, Jesus was an expression of the Christ, but so am I, right?
Mhm.
Like when Paul says that Christ is the one in whom we all live and move and have our being, something he said to unbelieving pagans, by the way, not to Christians. So he said that basically everyone, right? We're all in this Christ, and this Christ is the one in whom we all live, move, and have our being. But then it's also true that Christ lives and moves and has being in me. And so I know that we're the incarnation of Christ in the world today, right? God has no body now but yours. Christ has no body now but yours. We are the hands and feet of Christ. So those are some of the ideas that I started thinking about. And then in that mindset was when I first started looking into quantum physics and quantum science and the overlap of that. And I should probably say there's a book called The Self-Aware Universe by Dr. Amit Goswami. Someone recommended that book to me. I think they could see where I was going. They're like, hey, you should read this book. And that book really, really helped me because Amit Goswami does a wonderful job of connecting the dots. He really did it for me. Connected the dots between quantum physics and science and sort of these mystical concepts of like our shared divinity, our shared humanity, consciousness being the center of the universe and rather than material things and that kind of stuff. So that kind of set me off in that direction. And it's for me, what I called it at the time, because I didn't have any other language for it, it felt like a second deconstruction for me. Like it's like, okay, I already deconstructed my religious faith and all that stuff. And I felt like I had come through it and I was on the other side of it. And you have a sense of like, okay, I've got this figured out now. But then I started going in this direction and it felt like, oh, wait, I'm doing it again. Once again, I'm questioning everything. Once again, I'm in this place of not knowing what's going to happen next. And it's ironic because like that's why I started that Square One group for people that felt that way. But then I felt like there's nothing like this for me now. I don't know who to go to. Like Mo said, I have a network. Well, initially I didn't. And it was only, I just started talking to people. And luckily I did. There was like 3 or 4 people in my life at the time that when I would sort of whisper this idea of like, I feel like I'm going through like a second deconstruction. And I explained it. They were like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And so I was like, we got to talk. So I talked to those people. I surrounded myself with those people because, you need someone who's kind of been down the road, even if they're just a few steps ahead of you, right? Just somebody else who has been through these kinds of things. And so I'm very grateful for those relationships that helped me process through some of these things. But yeah, that's kind of what it was for me, is just completely coming out of my deconstruction of my Christianity, even my progressive Christianity, and realizing, yeah, there's more, that Jesus isn't the only one that has wisdom, and discovering like people like Black Elk and Rumi and people like this, all these other voices that were really, the exciting thing was seeing like they're all saying the same thing. And that for me was kind of the beginning of like, I think I'm going to call this quantum theology.
No, I love that you've done this as an anthology, because I think a lot of us have spoken to places that feel like when we were going through this process, we didn't have like a book or an anthology or a community. And an anthology, this book, it feels like a community of people all giving their shared experiences, coming together from different places, and different entry points and different viewpoints. And I think there's a collective humanity to it that I think gives us different touch points. Now, this is for anybody here, and it doesn't have to be specifically about Christianity, but that's at least my basis and background, and others here too. But I think that, where do we think that traditional Christianity has gotten stuck in certainty? Like where was that point where mystery didn't matter anymore and certainty was the main point?
I can take a quick shot at this. So this is where my black hole experience really informed the mystery versus certainty aspect of Christianity. And like Keith, in the book I wrote back in 2020, Into the Abyss, that's my term for the unknown, The black hole that was seen for the first time in April of 2019 required 15 or so telescopes set up around the world. You basically had an Earth-sized telescope, Event Horizon Telescope, the EHT, to see this, and it was stitched together over a period of 18 to 20 years. So there's this feeling, there's this sense in deep science in any field of always reevaluating your model, always questioning the hypothesis. You put that hypothesis on the table, you question it, and you upgrade your model when you see evidence that demands it. Well, when I saw this collaboration in the scientific community and saw the openness to upgrade and change models and look for new evidence and never clinging to the certainty of what they've already found because they're always looking for additional. I just thought, wouldn't that be wonderful to overlay that into the way we do theology? I had grown up that certainty is the thing, clinging is the thing. And I went from Camp A, evangelical Camp A, to progressive Camp B, and realized I was still clinging in the same way. So fundamentalism now to me isn't about the content, it's about the way we cling to our belief statements. And so the deconstruction of our beliefs is one thing, but the deconstruction of reality itself requires that we cling less and open our hearts more as new things come into the picture that we can then process, upgrade our mind. I hope I'll always be learning, a lifetime of learning, never having arrived.
Yeah. We talk about that's something else I mentioned to people in this Grow One group is I always say, hold loosely to your beliefs, right? Don't let the cement dry on those things, and it's tough because I think, conservative evangelical Christianity, which is kind of where I grew up, that was my indoctrination. It's very much about having the right information about God, right? And in fact, in college, I got really deep into apologetics, and that's all that is. It's really just coming up with an argument that kind of makes sense, to kind of push back the questions and the skeptics and the doubters and all that. But I realized it was more about convincing myself, you know what I mean, of my own questions and doubts, right? It was a way to safeguard against the eventual deconstruction that I had.
Josh McDowell, Keith?
Oh, yeah. Neil, Norman Geisler. Yeah, those guys. But I mean, chronologically, if you think of the history of Christianity and where certainty sort of crept in, I think there's two major historical touch points. Obviously, Constantine, in the sense where he, I think he strategically, politically decided, he and Eusebius decided, hey, let's rope in this Christianity, let's make it the state religion, and make it a tool basically that he could use, and by sort of fusing the church and the state together. And look at the first things that he put in motion. It was this Council of Nicaea to get all these leaders together. And the main things he wants them to decide are, what are the beliefs that everybody has to have that makes you a Christian? Think about that. For 300 years, Christians didn't really feel the need for that. They themselves didn't feel like this was a priority. Oh, wait a minute. We have to get everyone together, and we all have to have agreement. And unless you agree on these things, you're not a Christian. Prior to that, for 300 years, they held loosely, right, to these different beliefs. And it was okay if, Justin Martyr felt this way and Origen felt this other way. They freely exchanged the ideas, and they held loosely to those things. And they also, the other thing Constantine does, right, is he pushes them towards deciding what are the scriptures and what aren't. Now, that final decision comes later, but the initial conversation does begin there, right? And so why? Because to control the church, for the church to become an instrument of control and manipulation by the state, by the empire, you need to be able to have basically a single book and a single doctrine. And that for me was one of the beginnings of the church giving up on mystery. But I think for Protestants, it happens at the Reformation. And Brian Zahn has a great quote about this, where he says that if you think about the Reformation as a divorce, right, and then mom and dad are dividing up, the property and things. In the divorce, the Catholic Church, they got the saints and the desert fathers and the desert mothers and all the mystical traditions and all that stuff and all this great tradition. And the Protestants, all they got was the Bible. And so when that's all you got, you kind of need to make up for it. You need the Bible to be as important and as big and as powerful as all that other stuff that the Catholic Church got in the divorce. And so I think that's the beginning of where the Bible itself becomes sort of the third part of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Scriptures. And then it becomes about certainty. It becomes about, the Word of God and the Bible says, and this inerrant and infallible idea. That to me is where it begins, because then once you've got that, then there is no questioning. You can't ask questions. It becomes all about having all the right answers.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bit of a pattern I see actually when I look around the traditions, is that sense of mystery is often very strong when the tradition starts.
In the
The
beginning.
founders of the different traditions
Yes.
often have this extraordinary sense of mystery without wanting to codify it too much.
Mm-hmm.
But as we see the tradition progress through time, it becomes more and more difficult for their so-called followers to hold on to that.
Yeah.
The mind is always seeking security in concepts and ideas and beliefs. So at some point, things start to get codified, and in many different ways, which creates different denominations.
Yeah.
I think that pattern is pretty common across traditions.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you can look at, I have a friend who talked to me years ago, pointed that out. Like, if you study movements in general, not even religious movements, just political movements, art movements, different kinds of movements in human, it's part of human nature, like exactly what you said, Nish. In the early stages, it's all about, oh my gosh, it's a question, it's a wonder, it's a curiosity. What about this? What if we did that? What if this happened? Oh my gosh. And that's the excitement. That's what generates, that's what attracts people, followers to the movement of the, oh my gosh, the what if, the curiosity, the question, what if we did this? What if that was true? What if we, but very quickly it starts to become, people start defining it. And once they start defining it, it's not this, but it's that. Then it stagnates, and then it splinters. And then usually you've got, people will divide. Well, you think it's this, so I can't be with you. So I'm going to go over here. And you think it's the other thing. So I can't hang out with you. And it's exactly what happens. So I think that's why it's so important to hold on to that mystery and hold loosely to those things. And that's what's exciting to me, honestly, right now, because I really do feel like there is a bit of a revolution or a transformation or something that's happening right now. Probably as the result of the deconstruction that everybody is going through, where I think people are returning again in faith. People of faith are returning again to this idea of embracing mystery and admitting that we don't have all the answers, that God is being higher and wider and longer and deeper than any of us can possibly imagine, and being okay with that and saying, actually, that's better. To somehow find your security and your safety in the fact that you don't know all the answers. And I think when you can do that, the concept of God becomes so much more expansive and so much more interesting, and compelling.
Yeah, it ends up feeling to me like that oftentimes when we lean, especially like with traditions that lean hard into certainty, which many of them do, and they become calcified in it, but it's almost like they've embalmed faith.
Yeah.
Like we've somehow frozen it at a moment. Or like our faith is like, I don't know, like a wax figure like at one of those museums, like Madame Tussauds. And we're able to be like, yeah, that's kind of like a person.
Yeah.
But it's not. And we know it's not. But it's easier. And it's simpler, and I guess we can take it with us and we can control it.
Yeah.
And I guess it's one of those things where I think many of us have talked about having these experiences that make us feel small in the grand scheme of things. And I think certainty makes us feel big.
Yes.
In the scheme of things, that we're able to control things, we're able to make huge concepts tiny, and then we can make them whatever we want to be, but we've stolen life out of them.
Yeah.
No one's ever gotten drunk by reading the word wine.
Thank you.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was thinking, Mo. I remember having a conversation. I was speaking at a conference several years ago up in Seattle, and this subject came up, and so the sessions were over, and people were just kind of hanging out and talking. And I was talking to one of the other presenters, and I had talked about more of an experiential faith, right? This other guy said to me, and it was kind of sad to me. I mean, that's how I heard it. He just said to me, like, he says, I've never heard God speaking to me except for when I read the Bible. And I was like, wow. I mean, I understand that's a lot of people's experience, but it's like, but it's really sad to me, right? It becomes more about, like, for example, like the idea of when people say the only way that I have any experience of Christ, for example, is by reading the Gospels. And I get it on one level, but it's sort of like, then in a way, speaking in Christian terms, you're sort of denying the resurrection,
Yeah.
right? Because think of it this way. If I said, you know what, the only way I could know Abraham Lincoln is by reading his speeches and reading books about people that knew him and facts about him and information about him, and that's the only way I could ever know Abraham Lincoln. Why? Because he's dead, right? So in a way, I mean, for Christians to talk that way, they're kind of denying that Christ is alive, right? That there is a resurrected Christ alive right now. There is a God right now that they could communicate with, and that could communicate with them, that they could have a connection with and a relationship with, right? And that's very sad to me. And what's ironic to me also is that, so they end up having a relationship with a book. But what's funny is all through the book is telling you to have an experience with the divine and telling you that that's possible. And actually that should be what and frankly, and again, in Christian terms, the new covenant, the whole point of the new covenant is exactly that, right? When God first introduces the idea of a new covenant in the Old Testament, he says, the day is coming when no one will say to their neighbor, you should know the Lord, because they will all know me, every one of them. So it's about removing these barriers, right? It's a radical concept in Judaism, this idea that, oh, wait, every single one of us can have a direct connection with God without a priest, without a temple, without bringing any kind of a sacrifice. Those things are unnecessary. Everyone can have a direct connection with the divine. That's the whole promise of the new covenant, right? And so, again, it's just ironic to me and sad that Christians have bought into this message that frankly doesn't even align with the scriptures themselves. They bought into this idea that they can't trust their own thoughts. They can't trust themselves. If they start to hear what they believe is the voice of God or the Holy Spirit, they should mistrust that. And they should basically just listen to Pastor Bob, and Pastor Bob will tell them what God wants to say to them. And that is terrifying to me, that you would buy into a message like that. That's manipulation. That's a cult. So yeah, I think it's exciting to me because I do feel like people more and more are moving into more of an experiential kind of, and again, that's what the mystics are all about, right? Having your own direct connection with the divine.
Yeah, because otherwise, why? That's you mentioning Pastor Bob. We've all had a Pastor Bob.
Yes.
But if you even look at what Pastor Bob does, Pastor Bob says, I know everything.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you. So, what do you do? Come back next week. I'll tell you more.
That's right.
But none of this has to go about going out and experiencing things.
No.
None of this is going and walking this out into areas that involve us taking risk.
Yeah.
Quitting jobs.
Yeah.
Doing these things that are very different for us. And those are scary. But it's also, that's where life is lived. I feel like we can't live adventures sitting at home or sitting in a church pew all the time.
Yeah. And it's funny, again, way before I ever had these kind of aha moments, I remember there's a wonderful Catholic mystic named Fenelon, and someone gave me this little book he wrote called Let Go. And they're letters he wrote to people he was discipling. And this is getting back to how Catholics have this wonderful tradition, right, of mysticism. And anyway, one of the letters, there's one thing he said that I've never forgotten. But he's writing a letter to one of his disciples, and he says to this guy, he says, if you stopped learning now, you wouldn't live long enough to put into practice everything you already know of Christ. And that is the one quote. I read that and I just stopped. And I was like, yeah. Well, it's like Christian church has become a school that no one will ever graduate from. And you're not supposed to graduate from it. You're never, ever supposed to reach a point where the pastor could walk up to you and tap you on the shoulder and say, you know what? I think you got it, man. Why don't you just get up and go out there now and go out and live this and do this? You don't need me anymore, right? It's not about that. It's creating a dependency, like you said, on these religious leaders and always having a guru, always having a pastor. That's, again, something else in this process that was a big aha moment for me was that we, I understand at some point, we have people that we learn from, and people we read their books, and maybe we listen to their teaching, and that's good. We do need we need each other in this conversation. But I think, yes, at some point we need to realize, okay, I can do this for myself, right? In fact, for me, another big aha moment in this was when I was going through the Gospel of Thomas and reading the sayings of Thomas through this lens of oneness and connection. Jesus and Thomas says all the time, "I'm not your Lord, I'm not your master. Basically, I'm not your guru. You can do this. You can. Once you know these things, you can live them out." And so one of the sayings in Thomas is one that's familiar. It's where he says, that the blind, if the blind leads the blind, they both fall into a ditch, right? And I suddenly understood that saying in a different way. I realized what Jesus was saying in that, what he meant in that was, only blind people need a guide.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're blind, okay, sure, get someone to guide you. But once your eyes are opened, once you can see, you don't need a guide anymore. And I think that's the point, right? To reach a place where I can see for myself now. I have the capability of again, directly having this experience with God. And so I don't need to be carried around by a guide anymore. And so, don't have a guru, right? Guru yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. That's good advice. Now for the rest of us, as we're wrapping this up too, let's hop Mo. So if people could take away one shift in perspective from this book and add it into their daily life, what would you want it to be? And I'll be asking everybody the same question. So
A shift in perspective. I'd like to suggest something and then maybe read a short poem if you would allow me to do that.
Sure. Yeah, no, yeah, go ahead.
Would that
Go
be-
ahead. Yes.
would that
Please
be
do.
okay?
Please do. Please. Yes, please share.
I think the thing I'd like people to have permission to do in reading the book is to explore their core beliefs, the foundation of their beliefs, with openness, vulnerability, and courage. Because what you'll find is a substrate, a baseline, a reference point that is eternal, it's magnificent, it's beautiful, and it's our deepest, truest identity. It's our true self. And this poem, I think, encapsulates it. I read it recently, and it'll just take me 30 seconds.
Yeah,
Divine
please.
light, radiant in all things, make me a facet of your wholeness. Where I see separation, show me your hidden unity. Where I cling to certainty, open me to wonder. May I walk gently in your creation, speak truth in love, and reflect your brilliance, even in the shadows. May my life become a prism of grace, revealing your image in the many and the one. Amen. And that feels like a beginning, not a conclusion. And you may recognize that as Nish's poem to close his chapter in the book, which I just thought was a wonderful invitation to us. So I would kind of gently hold that out as encapsulating the invitation of the entire book.
It's wonderful. Anybody else?
I would gently suggest to the reader to question themselves and gently ask themselves, are things really as separate and discrete as we assume they are and as we live they are? Am I really that separate from the world? Am I really separate from other people? Am I really separate from nature? Am I really separate from God? Is God really separate from the world? And if we can start to feel into that almost moment-to-moment activity that we're constantly engaged with, that gives us that feeling of separation, sometimes hard separation, we may start to realize that there's another way of being. That's scary at first, as you let go of this sense of separate self you've been holding on to your whole life. But if you're willing to relax into the fear and work through the fear, there's a world of astonishing wonderment waiting for you on the other side. That's what I would invite people. And this isn't just made up. It's what physics is telling us. It's what all the religious traditions are telling us. So maybe it's true.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah. I'll just add to that for me, and this is what I encourage people listening and hopefully people that read the book,
Mm-hmm.
For me, this concept, this idea of our shared humanity and our shared divinity is so radical and so powerful. Like I call it the answer to everything. I feel like if we as a humanity, if we as individuals can really truly embrace the idea, truly receive and embody the idea that there is no separation between me and God,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore there's no separation between me and anyone else, that all humanity is all connected. Again, it's the answer to everything, because I think if we get that, if we see that, if we can embody that, it's how we love our neighbor. Because now when I look at my neighbor, I don't see another person. I see myself reflected in that person.
Hmm.
This is the way we love our enemy. Because when I see my enemy through this understanding, I don't see an enemy. I see reflected in that person the divine spark, the same divinity that's in myself, the same humanity that's in myself and everyone else. And I believe it. It's the end to poverty. It's the end to racism. It's the end to genocide. And my gosh, are we not living through a period of history that is all about division and separation? And
Yeah.
we are experiencing the fruit of that,
Mm-hmm.
the fruit of those that really do believe that we are separate from God and separate from one another, that we're separated by nationality and religion and politics and all these other things. And we're seeing the fruit of that, right? It's horrible. It's painful. It's creates a lot of suffering in the world. And so that's my hope, is that I feel like this is so important, because I feel like humanity is being offered an alternative to those things. We're being offered the chance to see that all those things are false, that it's not true that we're separated. It's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And to choose better, to choose something
Yeah.
that's more healing and helpful and hopeful. And hopefully people do awake to that and see that we are connected, and there is no separation between us and God, or us and one another.
I love that. And my only addition was kind of echoing off of everyone else's too. But I love that word that I've heard spoken several times today is permission. You know, that we have permission to ask questions, permission to go searching, permission to ask questions out of wonder and not fear. Because I think in the past we've been told, like, asking these questions, going on these journeys, seeking in these ways, we've been taught to fear them. Like they're outside the lines of what we're told to do. But I think that to take that and flip it into an exploration born out of wonder, I think in imagination, I think it changes us as well too, because it tells us we don't have it all figured out and there's more ahead of us.
Yeah, that's right.
So guys, if anyone listening to this wants to be able to find you, stalk you, devour your work, or worship you, who knows?
No,
Whichever one. How would you go about this, Mo? How do people find you?
Let's see. I have a couple books that I've written before this one. Into the Abyss in 2020 and Snow Globe in 2023, a couple years ago. Active on social media. You can find me there. And if anyone wants to reach out directly, mo.thomas14@gmail for any questions, comments, feedback on anything that you might see. I love talking about this. I think transformation is just one moment away for all of us.
Yeah, thank you. If anyone wants to find out a little bit more about my work, so there's two books. There's a book called The Unity of Everything, which actually most of that is a dialogue I had with David Bohm about 30 years ago, together with additional commentary that led to the creation of what I call the diamond model, that invisible diamond I mentioned earlier. And the second book is just published last year, called A Brief History of God, which outlines some of the different experiences and conceptions we've had of God as the human mind has evolved and become more complex. I have a website, integraldream.com, and if you want to reach out directly, yes, it's nish@evolvingnexus.com.
Nice.
So, yeah, you're very welcome, anyone who wants to get in touch.
Excellent. And old white dude Keith Giles?
Yeah. Well, so you can go to Amazon and search my name. You'll see my books will come up. The most recent ones, again, I would say the Quantum Sayings of Jesus, Decoding the Lost Gospel of Thomas, and then the Quantum Gospel of Mary are on Amazon. But the Quantum Gospel of Philip will be out in May.
Okay.
And excited about that. And I have a podcast, Heretic Happy Hour. I have a solo podcast called Second Cup with Keith. And I'm on socials, Instagram, Facebook mainly. And if you want to contact me. It's Keith at Quoir, QUOIR.com. And yeah.
Keith, don't you also write for a website?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah, what is that one that you're
I
a part of?
do. Yes, thank you for the plug. It's called The Collective. The Collective, but it's spelled wrong. It's spelled QUOLLECTIVE. The Collective. Because Quoir has to have everything has to be a Q. Yeah, so thecollective.com. And it's not just me, it's a whole bunch of people, including you, Stuart, but a bunch of other people. Amazing. It's a website that we created to really kind of like champion the First Amendment, give people an opportunity to kind of speak and talk about the world we're living in right now hopefully without being throttled or silenced by a fascist government. Yeah. So yeah, check out thecollective.com. It's very cool. There's a bunch of free articles up there, but you can also subscribe and get everything, unlock everything. So yeah, check that out.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for being here today. The book is Quantum Theology, Volume 1. There will be more. When is 2 coming out, Keith? Any idea?
Sometime next year, probably like a year from now.
Okay, about a year from now, there will be more. But this is great. And thank you guys for your time. And also just your expertise and sharing of your journeys and your stories. Because I think that us being able to talk about these kind of things is important for folks that are struggling and looking for answers in a time where answers don't seem to come easy. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stuart and Keith.
The end times are upon us. The signs are happening. The end is near, but don't panic. You may have missed the rapture, but there's still time to prepare for what comes next. Disasters, plagues, celestial malfunctions. Consider them friendly reminders. Now's the time to prepare. From homemade hazmat suits to heavenly currency and trustworthy prophets, this guide has you covered. Because when the heavens open and the world melts, belief alone won't save you. The Tribulation Survival Guide. How to stay alive when everything else is dead. Available now.
This Quoircast podcast is brought to you by The Collective. At The Collective, we believe that justice isn't optional, it's actually sacred. That's why we're building a growing library of progressive resources, connecting you with queer and Black-owned businesses, linking to books that challenge the status quo, and delivering content that empowers you to resist fascism with clarity and compassion. So join the movement. Support the mission. Visit The Collective, that's QUOLLECTIVE.com, The Collective, to learn more and get involved.